Welcome in to the Western North Carolina edition of the Friday Night Pressbox presented by Team FYN Sports. This is Jake West alongside Caleb Tallman. Caleb, a good week in football last week, as always, here in Western North Carolina. Highlight some of the individual performances from these guys last week that put their heart and soul on the line on the gridiron.
Absolutely. So we've got a lot of good performances around the conference this week. Go over to Cherokee. A lot of good options to choose in Cherokee as they pummeled Swain. But we went with Elijah Waddy, senior linebacker, and has also in recent weeks played a lot more running back and fullback for them, as Chase Calhoun has been a little dinged up, but had 11 tackles on D, 71 rushing yards, and a touchdown offensively. Over to Hayesville. Good senior offensive, defensive lineman. 8 tackles is quite a few for a D lineman. Great week by Ricky McCullough, well-deserving player from Hayesville. Then you go over to a guy that's really broke out, kind of came onto the scene out of nowhere this year, Jake. And there's probably a week or two where Cody Klein, I think Cody Klein probably stole the player of the week from the week they played Murphy, but Jarrett Panama, ever deserving. I mean, just look at that stat line: 7 carries for 53 yards and a touchdown. That's over 7 yards a carry. He had a higher yards per carry than Cutler did against Hazel last Friday night. And then, hey, how about those Andrews Wildcats? What we gave a team of the week, not just player of the week, team of the week. Andrews Wildcats, streak broken, only allowed 12 points, had 286 yards of offense, and what really was a dominating performance by the Wildcats. And then to wrap things up, another good night for Ty Hanley over at Franklin. 20 carries, 141 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. Hopefully Franklin figures some stuff out. Maybe the key to the game is hand it to Ty Hanley as they look to improve as they're going into playoffs this week, Jake.
Yeah. It seemed like Franklin kind of figured something out last week. I mean, TC Robertson is a school that's a little down in football this year, but they are a bigger school. But Franklin just pretty much dominated the line of scrimmage. I don't know. I'm looking here to see exactly how many rushing yards they had. They had nearly 200 yards of rushing and 2 rushing touchdowns. So they got it done on the ground, which is something they haven't really been able to do so far this year. Looking back at that game, Caleb, what stood out to you, and what did Franklin change to end up at 6-4? They weren't able to get a home playoff game, but they got that last win of the regular season.
Well, I mean, yeah, they picked up a win. And if you see, when you go look at the box score, it was 7-7 going into the fourth quarter, Jake. So Franklin came on strong late to win the game. And that's the type of performance you need to have going into playoffs, because that's what you're going to have to do if you want to win in playoffs. So one of the things that was concerning to me, though, Jake, if you're a Franklin Panther fan looking for your team to do better in playoffs, obviously Ty Hanley carried the load for you on Friday night. We've talked about Chris McGuire all year, though. We've seen what he's capable of, what he did to Hazel, what he did to Murphy, what he did to Swain. Well, last Friday night, McGuire had 9 carries for only 12 yards, and he was 5 of 13 passing. Not the kind of performance you want to see from McGuire in his last game. And I'd almost guarantee to say, not to put the pressure on the young man, but if he does not play better than that, regardless of what Ty Hanley does, they're not going to upset a good Kings Mountain team this Friday night.
Yeah, that's probably true. I mean, they've leaned on some other guys in the rushing game, such as Kellen Stiles and the Inslee kid after Watts went down with the injury. But you're right. If they can't, I mean, they had 200 almost. I think it was right at 298 yards of rushing yards, and Ty Hanley had 141 of those. So, I mean, he got, and they only scored 21 points, and Hanley had 2 of those touchdowns. So they're definitely going to have to find some offensive output from different places.
And what's scary, Jake, is now looking at the Max Stretch Bob score, Keegan Pollock had a 62-yard touchdown reception. So obviously he had a big, long one. But if you take out that 62-yard reception, you're looking at McGuire being 4 of 12 for 31 yards.
Yeah.
Which, hey, I will say this, because Hazel had some of the same struggles as a throwing team last week in the rain and the cold. And the weather does look like it's going to be better tomorrow night. So, I mean, let's hope for that. But you're going to need McGuire to find his early year form if you're looking to do big things in the playoffs.
Yeah, for sure. Because like you said, they play a good Kings Mountain team on Friday night. Speaking of Hayesville, let's stay with Hayesville. And you mentioned their struggles kind of through the air on a rainy Friday night. Let's play those highlights from their game as they traveled to Big Oaks and played Robbinsville.
Absolutely. It was a closer game than what it appeared, though, Jake. I will say that. Robbinsville got the ball first here, fumbled on a quarterback exchange. Hazel recovers it and then comes out on the third play from scrimmage, throw the tight end / halfback pass, I guess, from Jake McTaggart to Kyle Lunsford. So they took an early lead. And we're up 7-0 and had the ball back. And had the ball all the way near the 50, but then a personal foul, a deep sack, and a bad snap kind of got Hazel's great night off to a little shaky ending there as they got the 2 points. Then Cutler Adams had a really good return. And then Robbinsville kind of just took control at the start of the second quarter. They scored to go up 9-7. And then this one was a big one. No, it's one of the next ones. Hazel was driving again as down 9-7. And Jake McTaggart had a play that he caught, got a foot in out of bounds, and the referee called him out of bounds on a 4th down play. And that's the drive you see here where Robbinsville gets the ball back and scores again. So, I mean, the score was a lot closer, I think, Jake, than what it appeared. One of the interesting things is, and it might be something for Robbinsville, I don't know how healthy Cutler Adams is, and I'm not so sure. I mean, I don't want to question a Hall of Fame coach in D. Walsh, but I'm going to. Cutler carried the ball 29 times in a 31-14 victory for a kid that you've missed time this year. You know, why the heck is he carrying the ball 31 times? And he carried it 31 times for 161 yards. So Hayesville didn't bottle him up, but he was by no means running off 15 yards a carry like we can see him do sometimes. And then you go to a kid like Cage Williams, 15 carries for 119 yards. Jarrett Panama, 7 carries for 53 yards. They were averaging both 8 yards a carry. So arguably, they both had better nights than Cutler, who we just don't know if he's back to full health yet.
That was going to be my biggest takeaway from this game is the fact that number 33, Cage Williams, we saw him struggle a little bit early on, especially in those games without Cutler. I mean, we thought they would rely on him heavily, and he wasn't really getting the carries. But you see he gets 15 carries Friday night, goes for 119 yards, 8 yards a carry, busted off a 35-yarder and scored a touchdown. So I think that this Robbinsville team is peaking at the right time, heading into playoffs. I mean, we thought that Cutler and Cage were going to be a 2-headed monster all year, and they haven't really been that. But it looks like coming on here later in the season that Cage is really coming into his own, and he's going to be that nice power punch to Cutler's.
Look at this. This is a crazy play. Jarrett Panama picks up. Dason Gross fumbled twice on the play, and then Jarrett Panama said, "All right, I'll pick it up, bust off a 40-yard run." I mean, that's just crazy. That was one of the craziest plays I saw all Friday night.
That's why Panama's player of the game, just making stuff happen. But like I was saying, Cage is going to be a good power back to Cutler's speed. Not that Cutler can't run you over, but it's going to be nice to be able to lean on both of them. But like you said, with this game, you would think that they wouldn't have as put the ball in Cutler's hands as many times as they did in a blowout win over Hayesville. But maybe they'll let Cutler rest up in this first round playoff game because they're playing a terrible Winston-Salem Prep team. It's definitely, I mean, I don't even know if they have a kid on the team that came down here to Robbinsville last year and took them into double overtime. So maybe Cutler and Cage will get some rest in that one, and they can rest a lot of their starters because if that game plays out like it looks like it's going to play out on paper, it's going to get ugly, and it's going to get ugly fast. But let's not get into next week. Let's recap Cherokee and Swain first, and then we'll go to Andrews and Murphy. The Cherokee and Swain game, a big shocker.
I tell you what, Jake, I rewatched this whole game as I was making the highlights. Swain was as sloppy as a Swain team I've ever seen. 15 false starts, give or take. You saw fumbles right there, personal fouls, holding calls, multiple times. You saw Lillard, the quarterback and the running back, open the wrong way. Wrong receiver routes. Wrong. They look like a completely different team than they were 3 or 4 weeks ago when they were 2-0 in conference. Since they beat Hayesville, they've lost 3 straight, and it's gotten progressively worse.
Yeah, I agree. They haven't been able to find anything. They haven't been able to click at all. I mean, you mentioned all the false starts and the penalties and the fumbles. I mean, it's almost just like they're ready to be done with their year. They went from top of the conference to what they end up finishing?
Tied for 4th with Andrews, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. Just looking at their stats really quick, anybody from Swain have a really good ball game in this one, or because we were calling the Murphy Andrews game, obviously, which we'll get to that in a minute, but it seemed like Cherokee was pounding them the whole time.
Oh yeah, I mean Cherokee just dominated in the game, and unfortunately Cherokee does not put their stats. No, they did put their stats up this week. How about that, Jake? Caught myself off guard. They almost never put their stats on Max, which they did this week though. Yeah, Lillard was 5 of 13 for only 30 yards. The team as a whole rushed 35 times for 180 yards. But no one. Carson Taylor had 10 carries for 63 yards. That was their best. Groenwald had 3 receptions. Hyatt had 2. I mean, it's just there's not a very good performance. But then you look over at Cherokee. Don Bradley had a great performance, 4 or 5 for 72 yards and 2 passing touchdowns.
Yeah,
and also ran for 40 yards. Michael Driver had 109 yards on 18 carries. We obviously talked about Waddy, who was the player of the week. Then you had Michael Driver, who had 18 carries for 109 yards. And one of the good things to see, Jake, as we're getting ready into playoffs, Chase Calhoun, 5 carries for 40 yards, so averaging 8 yards a carry and a touchdown. So
yeah, that's what I was going to bring up is Calhoun. Obviously, they're easing him back into this because he was injured. At least I don't know what kind of injury he had.
Ankle.
An ankle injury. Okay. So they are easing him back into it, but he busted off a pretty long one, as you can see in that highlight. I think it's a 29-yarder, and he had a touchdown. So good stuff from Calhoun. I think you've got to think that I know the Hayesville game couldn't have been any closer, but it definitely would have helped them had they had Calhoun in that game. Because, I know he's just a sophomore, but he seems to be, or was before he got hurt, their number 1 running back.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So who knows how that Hayesville game goes if he's in there, but they decided to rest him and keep him, try to get him healthy, and they still do have a home playoff game against Cherryville this week. So I guess all in all, it's working out for them, but you got to think if they could go back, they'd probably try to push Calhoun to go in that Hayesville game. But nonetheless, they get by Swain. Cherokee looked like you watched them both times, Caleb. You watched Cherokee play Hayesville, and then you watched Cherokee play Swain. You gotta give it to him. Cherokee bounced back big time after that loss to Hayesville.
Well, and I'll be honest. I think Cherokee played fairly decent against Hayesville. I think they cut down on some of the mistakes and limited the turnovers was the key difference. But I think one of the big things is, and we're going to get into talking into our playoff games here in a few minutes, but Hazel's playing a lot better football right now. And I think they came out, and I think that really surprised Cherokee. But I mean, the way I look at it, Jake, is either Hazel or Swain are going to win, but I almost expect, 5 Smoky Mountain teams to advance to the second round on Friday night. But before we get too far into that, I know we still got to talk about I'm going to make you say, Jake, what happened on Friday night to your Bulldogs?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the biggest game, biggest shocker of Friday night. Not for anybody that knows football, because anybody that's followed football in Western North Carolina knows that this Andrews team is very good, and they knew that this game was going to be a very good game. But the biggest shocker, I think, from people that used to live in this area and moved away and just saw on Facebook was that Andrews beat Murphy for the first time in 40 years. And they did it. I mean, Murphy was ahead 12-7 at halftime, but it never seemed like Andrews was behind in this ballgame.
No. Absolutely not. And it surprised me too because I thought Murphy. Oh wow, Murphy's locked in early because that run you just saw was Ty Laney busting off a 60+ yarder on the first play from scrimmage, and then
Yeah,
they go in on a QB sneak. So I thought, okay, maybe Murphy's just gonna run with this, but then Andrews blocks the extra point, and it felt like Andrews' game from that point forward.
yeah. It seemed like a lot of teams in the past would have just laid down after a big run like that, but this Andrews team obviously knew, like, okay, well, we weren't in the right spot, like we didn't do our jobs on that play, but we're going to bounce back and recover and not let this game get out of hand just because of one play. I mean, you see it all the time. I've seen it from every team in the conference. I've seen it from Murphy, seen it from Hayesville. I mean, some big play happens against a team that's notoriously has been better than you in the past. I mean, it happened with Murphy in the Raven County game. They get a big play. Well, Murphy intercepted the ball off the first play from Raven, but they gave it right back to him, and then Raven County punched it in, and then it kind of seemed like Murphy just laid down. So you see it all the time. I'm sure you've seen it from Hayesville where somebody comes out, punches them in the mouth. I mean, teams just aren't able to bounce back. But Andrews did not do that, and obviously some calls didn't go their way. Obviously, this one he was out of bounds when he recovered the ball, so it was Murphy's football. But we talked about it all night. The ball should not have been able to be advanced forward on a fumble. That could have been another turning point where if something doesn't go your way, you pout, you put your head down, and you moan and groan, and you say, "Oh, it's just like every other year." But it wasn't. I mean, Andrews, look at that, just
Huge
nose to the
2-point
football.
conversion stop.
Yeah, I mean, they nose to the football flying around. Drew Martin had a big night. Austin Martin had a big night. I mean, the people you expect to be playmakers were playmakers. And then we'll see here in a minute. Cole Anderson had a big game-ending interception from Kellen Rumfelt, and Rumfelt was making some good throws until he got banged up. I think it
Look
was
at
it
that.
was
That's the play of the game right there when Murphy was getting ready to go in to score to retake the lead, and Austin Martin dove through the line and took Ty Laney down by the ankles.
Yeah, the defense obviously was the biggest. That's Andrews' strong suit, their run game and their defense. But was Rumfelt banged up in the third quarter? I think,
Yes.
or yeah, I think it was third quarter, and he's still banged up this week. So that'll be something we talk about heading into this playoff game. But 12 points allowed from the Andrews defense. That's huge. And Coach Phillips told us in his
There
pregame
it is.
interview that he thinks the Andrews defense is the best defense in the conference. And who's to say that he's wrong? I mean, they allowed Murphy to score 12 points. They let him get in the red zone a few times, but they were still able to stand up and make big plays and get stops. So I mean, I'd say it's a toss up between if it's Robbinsville or Andrews with the best defense in the conference. I know one thing, it's not Murphy, that's for sure. But it's probably a toss up between Andrews, Robbinsville, and the best defense in the conference. And the way Andrews is playing, I know nobody wants to see them on their schedule, and they're put in a really good bottom part of that bracket where they win this week against a terrible Bishop McGinnis team. Then they will have to travel, but they'll travel to Starmount, who we've talked about all year is not the real deal in our eyes.
Mm-mm. Well, and here's one of the things too. We've talked about this all year, Jake, when it comes to Andrews football. They have to be able to pass the ball effectively enough to keep teams thinking, okay, they can hurt us. And what happened? And I think it changed the whole course of the game was Donovan Bateman threw that touchdown pass. That was their first touchdown of the game. If I'd have told you, Jake, that the first touchdown of the game was going to be a passing touchdown for Andrews, you'd have looked at me and laughed. But
Yeah,
Andy Tatham came up with a huge catch. Bateman made a great throw. Bateman finished the night 3 of 5 for 63 yards and a touchdown. So he had 143 quarterback rating. That's pretty good, even though he didn't throw a lot of passes.
Yeah, I actually think this game could have gotten Andrews could have won by more scores, if even more points, if they would have put the ball in the air a little more. Because I mean,
It was effective.
Murphy was loading the box, trying to stop the run, and obviously they still weren't able to. But I think when Bateman's on, he's on. So you got to take advantage of that and let the kid build up some confidence, I think, um, heading into the playoffs. So maybe against the bad Bishop McGinnis team, like we talked about, they will try to put the ball in the air some more this week. What was your one takeaway, since this was our game of the week last week? What was your one takeaway from Andrews? Andrews, obviously, great game through and through. Don't want to say anything bad about them. I mean, they played a perfect game, but what's one thing that they can sharpen up to get better and make a deeper run in the playoffs?
I mean, I don't know. They played really well. I don't think they needed to on Friday night. I think they got to continue to look to pass the ball in different ways. Because what you mentioned this specifically, I know, Jake. What about the crossing routes over the middle? What about hitting some stuff in the middle? That first touchdown, Andy Tatham in the middle, right? I mean,
Yeah.
And then two, we've not seen a lot of trick plays from Andrews this year. It's playoff time, so unload the bag. You know what I mean? I don't think they'll need to this week, but if I was them this week, especially with the weather looking to be good, I would come out early, knowing you can win this game easy, and let Bateman throw a couple times and keep him confident. Give him some easy throws and build that confidence. That way, in the second and third round, hopefully he's confident and can make the necessary throws.
Yeah, I
What about
agree.
you?
Yeah, I agree. I think you got to let him throw the ball a little bit more, because there's going to be teams that are bigger than you up front that you're going to have to throw the ball against, that you're not going to be able to run against. But the biggest thing that they can build off of that they did really well, I think, was they were able to find a hole, unlike and that probably just it speaks to the fight in Andrews' line, and it also speaks to the lack of physicality on the Murphy line. But between the tackles, Andrews, give the ball to Austin Martin between the tackles, he's going to get 5 yards. I mean, he's 5 yards a carry every time.
And here's what I'll say about all that, Jake, is we've been hearing about it. We've been hearing about it. Weaver and Martin look like they're as healthy as they've been since the Hayesville game. And that's a big deal. That's a really big deal.
Yeah, I would agree. We saw the if you get on NC Preps, the message boards, you see the kind of playful fighting that goes back and forth between Andrews and Robbinsville about who's the best running back duo um, in the league, yada yada yada. I think I've got just my professional opinion. I think it's got to be Martin and Weaver, because look at the line they're running behind. No knock on the kids that are up there, but they're a lot smaller than that Robbinsville line. Robbinsville line is huge, huge. So Cutler and Cage, no knock on them either. They're running the ball really well, and Cutler's probably the best singular back in the league. But I just don't. There's not the Weaver Martin combo from seeing that on Friday night behind the little scrappy line that they're running behind. I mean, that's just, in my opinion, that's the best. That's the two best running backs right now, and they are a year older. But to me, it just comes down to they may have the same those two. Neither one of them may be as skilled as Cutler, but what they're doing behind that line is just incredible to me. Because I mean, look at the roster from Robbinsville and look at that line and compare it to the Andrews line. And I mean, this shows you how hard those guys on that Andrews front are fighting to get their guys behind them yarded.
Absolutely.
Let's take a break, Kel. We're about to hit 25 minutes. We'll come back and we will talk about these first round matchups. We'll look forward to some second round matchups, and we'll talk about some teams that are in Western North Carolina technically, but we don't cover here in the playoffs. So let's take a break, and we'll be right back.
At Circuit World, we offer a wide selection of major appliances, name brands like Whirlpool, LG, Frigidaire, and more. Looking for furniture? Come by and browse our showroom or check out the Endless Aisle, a touchscreen kiosk with thousands of options. Need electronics, gaming computers, laptops, desktops, tablets? We have it all. OLED or QLED, 4K or high def. We have the selection to get you the TV of your dreams. And don't forget, at Circuit World, your credit is always good. So ask about our convenient payment options and 120 days, same as cash. Come see us today at one of our 5 area locations.
Hey girl, back so soon?
Yeah.
Third time this morning.
Feeling too familiar with the bathroom these days? It's not just you.
Hey girl, look who made it 15 minutes.
At Erlanger Urology, we make it easy to talk about overactive bladder and treatments that work.
Hey girl, you not coming in?
No, I'm good.
Well, okay. I'll be here, because I'm stuck.
Learn more at itsnotjustyou.com. Erlanger Urology.
In 1981, Reed Nicholson began selling tires out of an old barn in Mineral Bluff. Little did he know that he had just laid the groundwork for the most trusted names in automotive services in the Blue Ridge area. In 1997, Nicholson Tire Center became what it is today, holding the same values of faith, family, and great customer service. 2 locations to serve you, and the Blue Ridge location is currently expanding to offer fast service and the largest U-Haul provider in Georgia. Nicholson Tire Center, Blue Ridge, and Mineral Bluff.
Welcome back to the Western North Carolina edition of the Friday Night Pressbox presented by Team FYN Sports. Caleb, let's pop up that 1A football playoffs graphic and let's talk about I know we did our playoff bracket show, but let's talk about what kind of surprised you here in the seedings and what are some other games that are not in the Smoky Mountain Conference that we want to talk about?
Honestly, I will say this. For all the flack that the RPI has gotten, including from you and I, the brackets aren't bad. I mean, they're just not. I mean, when you look at it, the bracket for the Smoky Mountain Conference ended up in conference order, right? And, teams that have earned it like Robbinsville and Murphy and Andrews, they've got fairly easy first-round games, and they should, right? And when you look at the bracket as a whole, though, some interesting games that I would be watching out for outside our conference is Star Mountain, South Stanley. That's a pretty big gap, 7-26. But Star Mount, we've not heard a ton on Star Mount, and we've just looked at their record and stuff and felt like they've been overrated this year. We'll find out, and then looking across the bracket, that and this is one of our games we'll talk about. Cherokee, Cherryville could be an interesting. And then of course you always have, like your 16-17 matchup, Drawn and Elkin. That's going to be a good game. East Wilkes, North Stokes, 15 versus 18. That could be a pretty good game. But really, and of course the Swain County Hazel game. But really, I don't think you're going to see but maybe 3 or 4 games that are within 10 points in this first round. And that's been the complaint. A lot of people feel like they should drop it to 32 teams instead of this many. Or even 48.
I mean, we saw good football games from round 1 last year when they shortened it. So I think you've definitely got – I mean, the NCHSAA wanted to do away with classifications for some reason, the 2 separate classifications, the one big A and the one little a. But they also want to make their money, so they're also going to let everybody make the playoffs. So it just boils down to money, I think, as to why we've got this humongous bracket here with all these teams making it in the 1A classification. I think they very easily could have kept it one little A and one big A and just kept if they wanted to have the same amount of games, they could have just kept it that way and played it out like we always have. But here we are seeing Robbinsville play Winston-Salem Prep, who has 1 win. The 1 win came from a forfeit. And we've got Eastern Randolph Rosman was going to have to play Eastern Randolph. Eastern Randolph hasn't lost. Rosman hasn't won. Thankfully, for the kids' sake, Rosman opted out of that game. There's a lot of games like that where it's like, what's it going to take to not have to see these games? And not only that, I mean, go over to the east side. It gives an unfair advantage to the east because you got teams like Tarboro, five East teams, I think, right, that have buys.
Yeah, let me pop it back up.
So Tarboro, Northampton,
Northmore, Northside, Pinetown, and I think there's actually one more that I'm missing, Jake, because this is our same graphic we used from the preliminaries. Because like you look at the top, it still's got Eastern, Randolph, and Rosman. So this is the preliminary bracket. There's only one or two changes from this one and the updated one.
Yeah. So I mean, that kind of gives an unfair advantage to those teams from the East because they're going to all get to take off this week, go sit in the stands and watch a football game, and get healthy. Where you've got like Robbinsville, they've struggled keeping their back, Cutler Adams healthy, and they've struggled keeping a lot of their kids healthy because of the gauntlet schedule they've had to play, where they're still having to suit up and go through everything, even though they're playing a terrible team on Friday night. They're still going to have to get out there and sweat. And every time you play, seems like more so in the games that you play that are like this, injuries seem to be more apt to happen when you suit up against a 4 versus a 29 that hasn't won a game all year. So, I mean, hopefully there are no injuries, obviously, but I think that's going to be one thing to watch out for is what's going to happen this week when teams are playing. If I was Mount Airy and Mitchell and Robbinsville, I would be upset for sure. I mean, Eastern Randolph, they were going to have to play, but Rosman opted out, obviously. But I would be upset for sure because the 1, 2, 3, 4 from the East are not having to play. I mean, Tarboro's not just going to walk into that November 12th game against probably Southeast Halifax and be as healthy as they have been all year. So, I mean, it kind of.
I think a really good way to go about this, Jake, was because I know the NCHSA wants to make their money. Why don't we go 48, right? That if you go 48 and you give the East and the West 4 teams each a bye, that means if you earn a top 4 seed, you earn a bye. That seems reasonable to me.
Yeah.
And you're still able to take, like I look at Hayesville, who had a rough start to the year, who, would be inside of 48, but would not be inside of 32. So I think that might be more reasonable. But let's be honest, NCHSA is going to make all the money that they can. I don't see them changing it, just if we're being honest. I don't care how many people complain.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, people complained about the split classifications for forever, and they just now got changed this year. So definitely don't think there'll be any changes. But just quickly glancing over there at the East, is there a game over there that you've heard maybe talk about on NC Preps or heard people talk about that's going to be pretty good that fans from the West should keep their eye on?
I've heard just as far as the game being close is Hopton and Lakewood at that 15-18. And then I'm trying to find where it's at. I heard that I think it was North Edgewood and East Columbus could be pretty decent. But I mean, the East is just not top to bottom. The East is not as strong. We know that. Now, when you get to the state championship level, Murphy and Robbinsville and the teams that have in Cherokee, they've had close games in the state finals. But we know as a whole, 1 through 32 or 1 through 27 in the East case is not as strong as the West top to bottom. So a lot of those times when you do see, that 2021 seed's not as strong. Like if you were to match up, the 1 through 27 seeds to play each other on the East and West, I think the West would go, I don't know, 22-5 maybe,
Who's the 27 seed in the West?
27 seed in the West. Let's find it. There's Albemarle's the 25. South Stanley's 26. If you asked me for one of those, I think it's Avery County, isn't it?
Highland Tech.
Highland Tech.
I was just looking at something here because the 27 seed from the East has scored 20 points this year. I mean, obviously, both 27 seeds are going to be probably haven't gotten a win, but Highland Techs will be playing Thomasville, and they've scored 77 points this year compared to the 27 seed. The 28 seed at Rocky Mountain Prep, who has scored 20 points this year. So a team that scored 20 points is awarded a first-round playoff game. And you mentioned it last week, Caleb, in the GHSA over in Georgia, just 20 minutes away. It really means something to make it to that first-round playoff game. And obviously, in North Carolina, it doesn't mean much when everybody gets in, and you've got teams that have scored 20 points through 9 games this year making the playoffs. I mean, it's it's crazy to think that. But let's get into some of our Smoky Mountain Conference first round playoffs games. What can you tell us about Cherokee and Cherryville game? That's a game that's probably going to be pretty close.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing: is Cherokee and Cherryville, neither of them put many of their stuff up on NC Preps. Just from what I've heard, though, looking at Cherryville, is that they've just had an up and down year, but they do have some talent. They are 3-7 on the year, right? But they've had games. I mean, they beat an okay Bessemer City team 23-6. I mean, not okay Bessemer City, but I mean, they're capable of putting up points. And they've played some really tough teams, but let's take this for a reference point, okay, Jake? Thomas Jefferson's the 5 seed, right? Pretty sure?
Yeah.
Yeah, Thomas Jefferson's the 5 seed. They played Thomas Jefferson on October 15th, Cherryville did, and lost 20-12. So Cherryville is obviously capable of putting up good games, and so but I think one of the things you're going to see here is Cherokee is as hot as they've been coming off that Swain game. That's a massive rivalry win for them.
Yeah.
Things are pointing up for Cherokee. I could see them winning a round or two here, Jake. And I think if Cherokee plays the way they're capable of, especially because think about it, it's been. Have they had a home playoff game? I know we can't look this up. We don't have the time, but I don't think they've had a home playoff game since that state championship crew. Have they? I'm doubting it.
I don't know. Probably.
I doubt it. I doubt it.
I know off the top of my head.
And so, can you imagine a home football playoff game for the Cherokee Braves? What kind of support and how filled that stadium is going to be? And here's the thing: if you're Cherryville, you go over there and you hear the pregame music that they play and the drums, and if you're not prepared for it like a Smoky Mountain Conference team is, it can get you out of your element.
Yeah, I agree. I think everything's in Cherokee's favor. It's just what Cherokee team shows up. The Cherokee team that had penalties and turnovers against Hayesville and couldn't get out of their own way, or the Cherokee team that beat Robbinsville, almost beat Murphy, and then thumped Swain. There's 2 different Cherokee football teams, as it seems there has been for every team in Smoky Mountain Conference this year. There's the Cherokee team that still got the win against Andrews, but turned the ball over four times, I think, and got stopped 3 times in the red zone. And the Cherokee team that kept, I mean, you mentioned the turnovers in the Hayesville game, and then there's the Cherokee team that played last week and thumped Swain, and the Cherokee team that beat Robbinsville. So it just depends on what Cherokee team shows up. When Cherokee takes care of the football, they are definitely one of the top teams in our area. And when they allow Don Bradley to do what he does, and Bradley doesn't try to do too much or doesn't have to do too much, like when he gets help from Calhoun and his running backs and Elijah Waddy's playing good, I mean, when Cherokee's clicking, they're tough to beat. Obviously, I mean, we saw them go down to the wire with the 2 top teams in the Smoky Mountain Conference and beat one of them, even though Robbinsville didn't have a lot of their players that week. But still, don't take anything away from this Cherokee team. Just like Andrews, nobody wants to see this Cherokee team on their schedule. And pull the bracket back up. What does their second round look like if they are able to get past Cherryville?
Robbinsville, who they beat.
So that that is going to be a revenge game, I think, from both sides, because Cherokee wants to prove it wasn't a fluke. Robbinsville wants to prove that with Cutler Adams, they could beat anybody and that it definitely was a fluke. So, Robbinsville wants to avenge that 21-7 loss. And the biggest thing about that game is it's going to be at Robbinsville. So Robbinsville is going to have a lot on their side if that game matchup does happen. But sticking with Robbinsville, not much to preview about their first round playoff game against Winston-Salem Prep. I mean, it probably sounds like we keep repeating ourselves over and over again, but it's just, with these first round games, there's not a lot to talk about. There'll be a lot to talk about once we get into the Hayesville and Swain game. But Robbinsville, a team that's peaking at the right time, a team that's going to average 200 yards on the ground, is playing a team that in Winston-Salem Prep that doesn't have a win. On Max Preps, it says they have a win, but that win was given to them because what team did they play? What team had to forfeit? Let's see. Here it is. They got a forfeit win from Walkertown, and I think Walkertown actually beat them like 38-14. So they'd be sitting at 0-8 right now. They've scored 94 points through 9 games, so that's not great. They've been shut out a couple times, I think. They only put 6 points up on Carver last week. And they lost 38-24 to Bishop McGuinness. And Bishop McGuinness is the team that Andrews is playing. Bishop McGuinness is 2-7. They've only scored 106 points. And 38 of those 106 points came against Winston-Salem Prep. So, just not a whole lot we can say about Winston-Salem Prep. We can talk about, you covered that game last year, Caleb, when Winston-Salem Prep played Robbinsville last year in double overtime. The quarterback from that team is gone. They just don't. There's no resemblance of that team at all.
No. Honestly, I'll wrap up what we have to say about Robbinsville. Robbinsville, we'll go with 2. You got 2 jobs if you're Robbinsville this Friday night. You want to know what they are, Jake? First off, keep Cutler healthy. Try to keep the whole team healthy and build Dason Gross's confidence. Me and you have been wrong about Dason at times this year because there has been times when he's played really well and elevated his team and done what he needed to do, and they've won big games, right?
Yeah. He
did not play well against Hazel last Friday night, and a lot of that's due to weather. But just to pull some stuff up, okay, that I've got. Dason Gross against Asheville. Huge win for them to open the year. 3 of 3 for 91 yards, okay? Robbinsville goes to Brevard the next week and lose. Dason, a below 50% completion percentage, 11 of 23 with an interception. Okay? Let's go to his Cherokee game when they lost against Cherokee. 8 of 15 with an interception. Okay? Then you go, and you just go across the schedule in tight games against teams that are good. When he's played well, Robbinsville's played well. When they played Swain, I just pulled that one up. 7 of 10, 99 yards and a touchdown. I think it really is that simple.
I think you can draw a direct comparison to when Dason plays well, Robbinsville plays well. When Donovan Bateman plays well, Andrews plays well. Both those teams are run-first football teams who also rely heavily on their quarterback in order to win football games. I bet you could go through, pull up the Andrews stats, and I guarantee you can look at those and see when Donovan Bateman plays well, Andrews wins, and when they're unable to get anything going in the passing game, Andrews has faltered. Bateman did not play well against Swain, so that's a game Andrews lost that a lot of people thought they should have won, and with the way Swain's playing right now, they definitely should have won. Bateman, I don't think, played very good against Cherokee. That's a game that Andrews lost.
Yeah, you look at when I'm pulling them up one at a time here. Bateman was 4 of 5 with a touchdown and also rushed for 30 yards and a touchdown against Hayesville in a big win. Then when they went and lost at Swain County the very next week, Andrews, never mind. Andrews pulled the passing stats down from that game. It wasn't pretty though. I think he was,
I think it was two for 16 or something like that. Not like it was not good at all.
Same thing at Cherokee, 4 of 18 when they lost. Then, let's pull up the Murphy game that we already talked about. 3 of 5 for 63 yards, no interceptions. So you're right, absolutely. But while we're talking about it, let's talk about that Andrews game a little bit to transition here. Bishop McGinnis. It's always good, Jake, when your first round playoff matchup is a school traveling to you that's known for girls basketball.
Yeah.
I feel like that's always favorable for you. Honestly, I don't have a whole lot on Bishop McGinnis just because they are 2-7, Jake. They've got an undersized line, so that matches up with Andrews' undersized line, but I think their undersized line is a lot tougher than Andrews. They did beat Winston-Salem Prep 38-24, but we already talked about how bad Winston-Salem Prep is. Any team with a pulse, though, has drilled them. Then they played Community School of Davison 45-7, Carver 28-7 loss, Pine Lake Prep 35-0 loss, Mountain Island Charter 47-0 loss. Even when they played a bad team, another bad team like Christ the King, who's only 3-7, they lost 24-14. I just don't see Andrews may pitch a shutout. I'm going to call that. That's my prediction. How about that? Andrews going to pitch a shutout on Friday night. I don't see, unless they hit on a big trick play or something early in the game, I don't know if Bishop McGinnis scores.
Yeah, if they do score, it's going to come on the back of Noah Nagel. He's their top running back. I think he's got over 500 yards this year, 6 touchdowns. I mean, 500 yards for a running back in the SMC is obviously doesn't seem like much, but he's their top running back. And then I think he also may be playing quarterback right now. They've got his stats listed as 10 for 21, and they've also got a kid who's 9 for 28. So maybe one of their, I don't know, maybe they're splitting time back there.
I will say this, and just some information I've garnered. They run like a smushed wing T offense. They push their wing T offense like further up to the line, and they say that's because their offensive line's so undersized that they want to be able to make their read super quick. So if you're Andrews, feel free to give him that fullback dive and let him run downhill towards the 2 Martin brothers. And then if you're Isaac Weaver and the Rose kid, just make sure you don't let a big quarterback, don't let the quarterback fake it to the fullback and then get outside and throw a pitch to the running back and let him bust a long one. So just try to force him up the middle. I just don't see it being close, Jake.
Yeah, I agree. That's a game that's going to be live on fyntv.com. We will have that one and the Murphy game. So tune in to fyntv.com on Friday night. Caleb, let's take a quick break and we'll come back. We'll preview the Murphy game and we'll preview the Hayesville-Swain game, which is going to be our game of the week.
At Circuit World, we offer a wide selection of major appliances, name brands like Whirlpool, LG, Frigidaire, and more. Looking for furniture? Come by and browse our showroom or check out the endless aisle, a touchscreen kiosk with thousands of options. Need electronics, gaming computers, laptops, desktops, tablets? We have it all. OLED or QLED, 4K or high def. We have the selection to get you the TV of your dreams. And don't forget, at Circuit World, your credit is always good. So ask about our convenient payment options and 120 days, same as cash. Come see us today at one of our 5 area locations.
Hey, girl. Back so soon?
Yeah.
Third time this morning.
Feeling too familiar with the bathroom these days? It's not just you.
Hey, girl. Look who made it 15 minutes.
At Erlanger Urology, we make it easy to talk about overactive bladder and treatments that work.
Hey, girl. You not coming in?
No, I'm good.
Well, okay. I'll be here because I'm stuck.
Learn more at itsnotjustyou.com. Erlanger Urology.
In 1981, Reed Nicholson began selling tires out of an old barn in Mineral Bluff. Little did he know that he had just laid the groundwork for the most trusted names in automotive services in the Blue Ridge area. In 1997, Nicholson Tire Center became what it is today, holding the same values of faith, family, and great customer service. 2 locations to serve you, and the Blue Ridge location is currently expanding to offer fast service and the largest U-Haul provider in Georgia. Nicholson Tire Center, Blue Ridge, and Mineral Bluff.
All right, let's get into another game that's not going to make much of a difference what we say. Murphy, a 32.5-point favorite. That game's live. Murphy versus Allegheny live on fyntv.com. Obviously, the picks this week, I'm sure you've got Cherokee winning, Andrews winning, and Murphy winning. The only time where is that correct, Caleb?
Correct.
So I would say the only time that our picks might differ is in this Swain versus Hayesville game. But this is a good game. Murphy needs this game, and they need it badly. They need to get back on track because last week, 12 points, and I saw their stats. There's just not anything worth talking about. I mean, it starts up front. It starts with your line if you want to win football games in the mountains. And the line and the physicality is just not there. I've talked to some coaches and players from Murphy, and that's what they all say too. I mean, they've got to be more physical if they want to win ball games. So we'll see if things change here. If they don't change, I mean, I think they still get the win, but it could be close, a lot closer than that. Spread predicts. I mean, if Murphy doesn't change things up, if this could be just a 2-score ball game instead of a 4-score ball game, like it should be.
Yeah, the only thing I will say, Jake, for this game is similar to how we talked about with Robbinsville. I think if you're Murphy, you have to decide, right or wrong, what is your identity this week? Because you're in playoffs. The time to figure stuff out is now over. You now what you need to do is you need to just go with what your best is and just roll with it. Stop experimenting on defense. Stop experimenting on offense. Decide who you want to be and what you're going to do and come out and do it in this first round playoff game so you can put something on film and prepare your team for week 2. And if it's me, if Joseph Watson is listening to this, which he may or may not be, let Kellen Rumfeld throw the dang football. And I know you're closer to their program than I am, but if you want any chance to make a deep run in the playoffs, and I think the talent is there to potentially do that, let Kellen Rumfeld throw the football like he did in the state championship game last year and put it on his back, on the wide receiver's back. Your best athletes are Kellen Rumfeld, Juan Allen, Peyton McCracken. Hunter Stallcup's great at catching out of the backfield. And then, let Hunter Rainey run it a little bit. He's still going to get his 10 to 15 carries because you're not going to go complete air raid, but that's what you need to do if you want to win the playoffs. You're not going to beat people. I'm sorry. Like, it's just been proven out. You're not going to beat really good defensive football teams running it down their throat. Yusuf Mugerbill is not there to run behind anymore.
Yeah, I agree. I think the injuries on the offensive line have really hurt them, and who knows if they'll be back this week. That's another reason this game could be a lot closer than people think. I mean, I'm thinking just probably 2 scores because they're hurting on the offensive line. They had 3 starters out last week. They're probably going to have 3 starters out this week. So, I mean, Murphy needs this. They need to get back in the saddle. They need to – obviously, they've got to come away with a win or the season's over, but they need to get those guys healthy if they want – because they got Mountain Heritage in round 2.
Yep. I mean, it's just the way it is.
What about Hayesville and Swain? I think this is a game both these teams could win, and both these teams honestly should win. I know Hayesville wants to avenge that blowout loss they suffered against Swain in the early regular season. But Swain, a 21.5-point favorite. I think this is definitely going to be closer than that with the way Hayesville's been playing the past couple of weeks. As long as Caldwell is smart and plays good football, this game will be close. If he comes out and he turns the ball over first thing and Hayesville can't get out of their own way, then Swain will win this one just like they did in the regular season.
Couple of big key differences, Jake. First off, Hazel's got McTaggart for this whole game. That does make a pretty large difference. He did not play until the second half when his suspension ended against Swain the first time. And I think it was 35-7 at that point, maybe. I forget exactly what the score was coming out of half. It was ball game over. So you got him for this whole game, which changes the Hazel offense and defense drastically having him. And then Hazel's just playing better football. Since that game has happened, Hayesville has played their best football of the season. And I tell you what, they played really good at Robbinsville last week. Robbinsville's just a really, really, really good football team. And barring one bad out of bounds call and a long snap over the punter's head, that Robbinsville game may have been more 28-21 than it was 35-14 or 31-14, So it does make a pretty big difference. And then since the Hayesville game, Swain has played their worst football of the season. Where's the Swain team that beat a top 10 3A team in Smoky Mountain at the beginning of the year? I mean, they got hammered by their rival Cherokee. I understand it was their seventh game in 8 days or 7 days, whatever it was. But how do you come out on senior night against your biggest rival when your schedule? I mean, you got to think because the schedule rotates now. So you only get senior night against your rival once every 10 years at home. And you just drop, and they laid an egg, and they played terrible. I mean, the false starts, the penalties, other than the false starts, the miscommunications, the turnovers. I don't think it's going to be any surprise to people that watch us. I'm picking Hayesville. I think Hayesville is going to come out, and I think they're going to win this football game. I think they're playing motivated. I was at their practice yesterday for a little while. They look as sharp as they've been all year. And we've not mentioned it, Jake, and I'm not going to get too deep into it. We saw how well Andrews played last week when they had some special motivation, playing for a fallen teammate. It's been a tough week over here in Hayesville for multiple reasons that I'm just not going to get into too deep. But I think Hayesville's going to come out and have plenty of reason to play motivated football, and that's a dangerous place to be come playoffs.
Yeah, I think that, like we've talked about, it always just depends on what team shows up. I mean, these Smoky Mountain Conference teams have two different identities. Does Hayesville show up like they have the past couple weeks, or does Hayesville show up like they did against Andrews? Because, in that Andrews game, they couldn't get anything going, and you would agree, I would think, Caldwell played his worst football in that Andrews game.
I agree. But what I say about that is, too, and I know it's just one player, the team, it lifted the rest of the team. It's not that McTaggart's playing so amazing, and he's playing really good, like he's capable, but it's not that he's playing so good that he's a one-man wrecking ball. But since he's gotten back for the last two games full go, the whole team has elevated their play around that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But I also think they are playing a Swain team that with Groenwald, I'd say Groenwald matches up better with McTaggart than anybody in the conference. I think even you would agree with that. I'm not saying that Groenwald can shut him down, but I think that's going to be the toughest matchup Jake's faced this year. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree, but what you see is Robbinsville shut Jake down pretty well offensively, but because they were putting so much attention on him, Kyle Lunsford had 140 receiving yards. So I don't know that Hazel's got a lot of weapons. Asher Brown, Kyle Lunsford, Taylor McClure to go along with Jake McTaggart. And I know we got to close out here, so I'll just say, go ahead. Take McTaggart out of it offensively, and Hazel's got other pieces now that you can't spread your defense around as much?
I think that even with all I've said and all the reasons why not that I've said not to pick Hayesville, I think I'm going to pick Hayesville too because, like you said, they're playing for something other than themselves, and I think they want to avenge that loss. So I think that's going to do it for us, Caleb. For Caleb Tallman, this is Jake West. This is the Western North Carolina edition of the Friday Night Press